So today's lesson 13, not chapter 13, but lesson 13, and we're going to cover a lot of chapters, basically 22 through the end, I believe. I'm actually not going to cover everything.
We're just going to breeze through it.
Breeze through it. The things I really want to focus on would be the subjunctive and the imperative. That is the main thing. Other than that, everything else is you learn as you go. Pretty simple. And I did not bring my book, so I can't tell you what pages things are on.
We'll figure it out.
You just have to figure it out. I think I did bring it. I just left it in my truck, and it's time to start. So, overview of what's really more like a remembering thing and seeing. So we're looking at the verb still. So the subjunctive and the imperative are considered verbs or types of verbs. And if you remember this, tense, voice, mood, person, number, these are the parts of a verb that you need to be able to recognize. And what would fall under a tense? Present.
Past.
Not past. You have primary tenses and secondary tenses. Primary tenses generally end with o, ace, a, men, te, usi, mai, sai, tai, metis, de, ntai. And secondary tenses is the nu, sigma, nun, men, te. Is it nu? And then, it's not my. I'm going blank on the first one. Anyway, going blank on that one. But it's sa, ta, metis, de, nta. I don't know what the first one is. Anyway, so present tenses, so secondary, now primary tenses would be present, future, and perfect. And then the secondary tenses would be, you have imperfect, aorist, and pluperfect.
That's a great word to say. Perfect.
Yeah. So technically, we've covered all that. Okay, how about voice? What do you remember about voice? This is basically dealing with the subject. AMP. Got an A for active, M for middle, and P is for passive. So remember, the active is basically the subject acting on something. Middle would be kind of both. There's ways, and then the passive would be being acted upon. And the mood. This is really what we are learning today for the most part. So mood. I'll do this color. So we've learned the indicative mood, which is basically just assessment, or not assertion, just saying something. It doesn't have to be true or false, just saying something. We've also learned, it's not technically part of a mood, but you could say participle. It's a verbal adjective, which you three weren't here. So I don't know if you watched the video. I posted it late, which is very important to Greek. 1 out of every 20 words is a participle. So I recommend at least watching that. And today we're going to learn the imperative and also the subjunctive. So those are the two things that we're adding. There's also optative, but it doesn't really occur that often. Very, like you can probably count on your hands. That's how many times. So context. And then person number. You know what person is? Yes. First, second, or third. Tissue. Man, you remind me of Jacob. You remind me of Jacob in Sunday school class. He's always asking for a tissue. And he'll like stop in the middle of me talking, say, I gotta go get a tissue.
Must be a good team freak out about that a lot.
No, he freaks out about
I wonder where he gets that.
I'm wondering, now I'm seeing where it's a family thing. Okay, go get a tissue. I'm teaching. Hurry, hurry, hurry.
Move it, Jacob. Sorry, Stumpy.
People watching this video are going to be like,
Stumpy. So you have person first, second, and third. And first person would be I or we. We.
Second person, yeah.
Now, the second person would be you or y'all, if you want to go southern. And third person would be what?
they,
Or
them,
try again. If I say they over there, or I could say just point to one person.
this.
Apparently, James thinks women are objects.
Okay, them over there.
Yes. Yeah.
He, she, or it.
Yeah.
Hopefully he doesn't think you're an it. Okay. And then we have number. Hannah, what's number?
Cooper. I know.
So if you have a first, second, or third, what distinguishes the I or we?
Come on, this is English. One person versus a group of persons.
Singular.
Yes. Singular or plural. I can't write. I got stuff in my way. Singular or plural. Singular would be I and plural would be we. Singular would be you. Plural would be you. And singular would be he, she, it. Yeah, I know. It is. Which
like that too.
Greeks likes that too.
That, it would all depend on the context.
Which we're about to find an example of that soon. So we're going to begin by looking at the subjunctive mood. Put these slides together yesterday, so I can't guarantee everything. But anyway, so thus far in the course we have studied only the indicative mood. Technically, participles can fall under that. And which the indicative mood is the mood of assertion. Greek has three other moods: the subjunctive, optative, and imperative. We're only going to look at the subjunctive imperative. So when we move outside the indicative mood, we go from assertion to contingency. So you're probably not going to understand everything, but when we go through it, that makes anyway. Just follow along. So from action asserted to be real toward action that is potential. So it's basically from something that's asserted, something that doesn't have to be true or false, just I did this, or I am doing this, to now it's going to be moving into the potential or coming away from something that has actually happened, or could be, or will happen, anyway. So the subjunctive mood is one step removed from the indicative. Generally speaking, the subjunctive presents the action as uncertain but probable. Although it is an oversimplistic definition, the subjunctive can be called a mood of probability. It can also be used to express the exhortation or the axiomatic concept. I'm sure you all know what that means. Can also be used to express. Yeah, I already read that. Axiomatic concept to indicate purpose and to express emphatic negation. So verbs in the subjunctive have no time significance. So there's no time involved with the subjunctive mood. It is aspect based, or kind of action that matters. This is verbal aspect. Whereas the indicative mood is used mostly in independent clauses, the subjunctive is used mostly in subordinate clauses. So the English has the subjunctive also, and it's usually with the word might or may. So I might learn or I may learn the New Testament Greek. It can also be used to express a wish. I wish I were smarter. That's the English anyway. So yeah. What's that? So when we look at the forms, we have luo, lues, lue, luomen, luete, and luosi, or seen. So if you just hear the pronunciations, luo, lues, lue, that sounds exactly like the present active indicative, luo, lues, lue. So this one right here, in form, it's going to look pretty similar to the present active indicative of luo. So you know how you're going to tell? Context. So really what happens is that the within the subjunctive mood, certain vowels lengthen. It's usually one of the last vowels before the oase, mente, usi. So we've memorized oase, mente, usi, but you'll notice that we have lu, ace. Well, this right here, epsilon iota, is actually being lengthened. The epsilon is being lengthened to a eta, and the iota is going to drop right underneath it. So the best way of understanding this is that you'll see a lengthen in the connecting vowel. So like we have lu, ah, men, which is we loose or we are loosing. Well, now if you lengthen this connecting vowel right here, it changes to a omega. So ah turns into an o. E turns into an a. So it's all phonological. Yeah, I'll leave it at that. So basically the endings are all going to be the same, and just the connecting vowels are being changed. But I do want to note, if you look at the aorist, you'll notice that the epsilon is not there. Remember the epsilon, that is the past time morpheme? That is not there. So if you see luso right here, it's not I will loose, but it could be I may, or how would you do it? I might have loosed. Yeah, I might have loosed. Really, it's hard to translate the subjunctive without context. So that's why you don't really see a translation next to these. But if I had to translate it without context, and if this was all I had, I would say for the aorist it'd be I might have loosed. Yeah. Any questions on that? No? Okay. So there's about 4 or 5 different uses for the subjunctive. The first one, which is straight out of your book, the hortatory subjunctive, and this is basically translated with the English words "let us." So the example from 1 John 4:7, agapomen allelus, which is let us love one another. Again, context is what's going to make the key for how you're wanting to translate it. So you just have to just keep these in mind. Mainly when you come across a subjunctive, I recommend just going to your grammar and looking at the uses and trying to find one that fits within the context, if that makes sense. There are some key helps, like the number 2, which is the subjunctive of prohibition. You're going to have the may with a subjunctive. Because oo is for, if you remember oo, that is the negate particle for the indicative mood. But may is for basically the rest of the moods. So if you see a may, it can be, but it's most likely not going to be with the indicative mood. And if it's within a subjunctive, it's kind of almost like a command. Don't do this. Stop doing this. And we're going to learn that the imperative does this also, but it does it a little differently, I think. Have to double check. 3, the deliberative subjunctive, which is used in 2 ways. It may ask a question, and the answer to which is uncertain or requires deliberation. If the question is rhetorical, then no answer is going to be expected. So like the example here, ti un poiesomen. Really, what's going to happen is it's going to have this, it's called an interrogative pronoun, which we're going to learn later, which is the ti in the example. So that'd be like what, why. But here would be, therefore, what should we do? Or what then should we do? I usually, un right here, I usually translate it as therefore, just my own habit. And it's usually post-positive anyway, so it comes after. But some translations will do like what then, translate it as a then. But that's just my own thing. Because I see it as helpful when you're translating and seeing the structure of a passage, basically. Yeah. 4, there's it's kind of like number 2, but this was emphatic, so it's going to have both oo and may. And so the words that you would kind of translate this would be never, certainly not, by no means, and it's going to be with the subjunctive mood, yeah. Which I think it's going to be the ekbalo. Yep. So the one who comes to me, I will by no means cast out. Ekbalo is I throw out, which is the aorist form. But that's how you would translate it. And then, I'm really not worried about knowing all these. I'm more worried as if you can just remember the word may or might, and if that doesn't seem like it fits the context, then I would look at the uses, because really there's a lot of things to memorize. And at the end, we're going to look at an example of the subjunctive mood and how it kind of works within a passage. So yeah, and the 5th one, the subjunctive is frequently used in subordinate clauses in conjunction or with the conjunction hina, which is in order that. Less frequently hopos, which is like so that or that. And this is just to indicate purpose. So, oftentimes, if I remember right, the subjunctive happens in conditional clauses, and that's just going to be kind of the one of a clue that a subjunctive is being used. And it's usually independent, and sometimes it has the hina. Yeah. Anyway, the very important ame verb, which is to be, is also in the subjunctive mood. And those are the, I can't, out of everything I translate, I may have only seen this happen once. So it doesn't really, the ame verb, but I haven't really translated the Gospels that much, so it could be in the Gospels more prominently. But so it kind of depends on what you want to translate, what you want to memorize first. But if you're not translating the Gospel straight off the bat, saying this is probably not the most thing you want. I'm thinking we've gone through 13 lessons now, and there's so many things you got to memorize. I'm not as worried about memorizing all the forms of ame at the moment, but I do want you to know that ame exists and is very important to understanding the Greek language. Which basically is, to be, and so on and so forth. And this would be like maybe, not the one word, but two word may be. So, any questions on the subjunctive mood? It's just, simply put, it's kind of like bringing out the probability of, it might be an oversimplification, but just bring out probability, I might do this, I may do this. So the imperative move, this is basically the Greek way of giving a command. In English, we only have the imperative mood in the second person, so you do this. But in Greek, it's in second person and third person. So not only you do this, but it could be let him do that or make him do that. That would be the third person. So you're basically, it's almost as though you have a intermediary for the third person. You're talking to someone to tell someone else to do something, but it's coming from the subject of the verb. So that's the main difference with English, is the third person, which is kind of difficult to translate and understand. So I'm not expecting you to truly know that, but just to know that the imperative mood is basically a command. So when you see an imperative, be ready to translate it like, do this, or stop doing this, depending on if there's a may there. Any questions on that? I pretty much simplified that paragraph. So if you look on here, it's kind of small because I want to try to fit everything on one thing, just so you could see the forms of the imperative. Best way to say this is to recognize this. Everything but the second singular would be to or te. If you can remember to or te, you got it. Because if you look at third person singular right here, you have lueto. But if you look at the third person plural, you have lueto son. So you're just adding the son to the third person plural. Same thing here, luesto, son for the present middle. So, but if you remember to or te, in the middle, it's the tau is going to change into a theta. So tau, in a sense, lengthens into a theta. It's not really what it's doing, it's just a different form, but it's the way I use it to memorize and recognize the imperative. So you're going to have, you have lu, which would be the lexical morpheme, which gives you the meaning of the word, and then you have the ending, which the epsilon here I believe is just the connecting vowel, and the second person singular just doesn't have an ending on there. So just have to remember those, which is going to be either epsilon, u, or a t. Yeah. Epsilon, u, or t, or psi. But I'm just trying to help you memorize this or recognize this, because you'll notice that even in the plural, the te, you have a ste. You're just adding the sigma, and the tau changes into a theta. It's not really changes into it, but it's a different ending. But I'm just the way I memorize it. Does that make sense? Am I explaining that clear? So yeah, these are the forms. You'll notice that the passive aorist is going to have the theta, eta. So that's how you're going to recognize that it's passive. I do want to point out the hard part is the second plural of all these. Well, besides aorist, I guess, because aorist doesn't have the epsilon. But in the present tense, it's going to be exactly the same as the indicative. So if you remember, we have luo, lues, lue, luamen, luete. And luete, exactly the same. So context is the only way you're going to know if it's going to be an imperative or it's going to be in the indicative case. Mood. Not case, but mood. So yeah. Any questions on that? I'm trying to do this really kind of simple, just so you can see some things that are kind of helps you recognize it. That's the main thing, is be able to recognize it. But really, you're not going to be able to recognize it until you practice. But that's that. So the uses of the imperative is to say command, which is basically whatever the lexical form is. So if it's baptiste t, it's going to be baptized instead of the ending, yeah. Luson would be loose him, or be luson, auton would be loose him. Este, agatha, tekna, which this is the imperative of the ame, I believe. Be good. So be would be how you translate the ame verb. Agatha is good, and tekna is children. Be good, children.
Is this, with the be good children, is this be good children or be good children? Like, are you saying be good children, or are you saying be good children? Like, I'm not really explaining this well. I'm like, okay, are you saying be good, comma, children? Like, be actually good children, or you're telling your children to be good?
Telling your children to be good.
That's what it is, okay.
You're commanding them to be good.
Not to be good children, okay. Well, technically that does make them good.
Would work.
Both of them would work, though,
It doesn't really matter.
Okay.
because you're telling the children to be good.
You're still giving a command.
Yeah.
It's not the situation where it's like, let's eat grandma, and let's eat grandma.
Yeah.
Yeah. But the word let kind of makes it a polite request. Which, actually, if you look at number 3, right here, is basically like a polite request. Pater, hagie, sorry. I got stuff in the way of mine. I have buttons. Te reson, atus in to onomati su. So pater is father. Hagie is another word for, that's the word for holy or set apart. So Holy Father. And then you have teresan, preserve them in your name. And you have to do this one based off the context, from a lesser to a greater. Generally is how this is going to show up. Because you usually don't, normally depending on the context, you don't see the subordinate. I mean, this is Jesus talking in this example, but you don't usually see the slave giving a command to the master. So, in a sense, it comes across as a request. Please do this. So, context is what's going to make that case. And really, I think if you look at it in from a Greek standpoint, it's probably more of the way you said it than it is the words themselves. But since we just have the words, you have to base it off context. And then we have number 2, which is the prohibition. And this is basically going to be like the subjunctive. Trying to think. I want to say there's a difference there, but I can't remember off the top of my head. The present imperative is generally used to prohibit the continuance of action in progress. That might be the main difference right there. You may use the word stop to translate it if it is warranted by the context. In general, precepts, the negative present imperative looks to the future and has the sense, make it your habit not to. In other words, this use of the imperative forbids an action that is likely to be continuous or repeated. And really that's an imperative in the present tense, which present tense has the habitual progressive nature to it because of verbal aspect. So when you tell them to stop, you're actually telling them not just to stop, but to never do it, period. So it might be in a, depending on context, it might actually be a stronger way of saying don't do this. Because you could say don't do this, may only mean for a certain period of time, but you can also say don't do this in the present tense and mean just never do it again. Don't ever make it your habit to do it until further notice, basically. And I think that's the main difference. So a lot of times people would, like this grammar says, make it your habit not to do this. So yeah. Any questions on those uses? So I did want to spend a second on the third person commands because it's not something you do in English. So normally an imperative, the third person imperatives are translated like let him say, let her say. You usually supply the word let. But it's probably better, which I think I agree, to say he must say. In other words, you're commanding someone to tell him that this must happen. He must loose, for example here, he must loose the evil servant. Or I command him to loose the evil servant. So the way I kind of picture this is God is talking through like someone like, I'm thinking Old Testament off the top of my head, talking to the prophets, and he's telling them, telling the prophet to tell other people, don't do this. But yeah, that's an example I can come across in my head. Any questions on that? Okay. So the imperative of the AME is this. I'm not expecting to memorize it right now, but just be aware of it. kind of interesting to say be, which obviously need context to do that. And if you remember, the ame is kind of like an equal sign. So you have usually a noun with the ame verb, and then with another noun, because the ame takes in the nominative case, or it could be adjective, but it's going to be in the nominative case generally. And so that's basically, the ame is kind of like an equal sign. So if you're telling someone to be this, you're basically, whoever the subject or whoever's being commanded to is to equal whatever it is. Again, context is key, because, I mean, it's different if God says be this than maybe a brother and sister talking to one another. So yeah. So if we just look at the summary, I think this kind of helps us put it all in perspective. In the indicative, it just makes the assertion. So he is studying Greek. And the subjunctive, this is action that's probably not yet occurring. So it's either he may or might study Greek, or if it's in a conditional clause, it's if he studies Greek, he will learn Greek. And the optative, which we haven't covered, but this is really where the English uses as a subjunctive, but in the which I think there's a debate on that. But in the Greek, it would be optative, which would be a form of wish. I wish, or if only he might. There's other words. It's possible, but there's no guarantee. Whereas if I say I might do this, there's generally, if you were put on a scale, I am doing this. I might do this. I wish I could do this. There's just a different mindset behind those three. And then the imperative is just do this. Study Greek, yeah. The action is possible, but it involves one person attempting to exert influence on another to produce action. So when God commands people to do something and you don't do it, well, you're sinning. But in generally, it's a disobeying, and I don't know. I like the imperative in the Greek because sometimes you don't always see it in the English translations, and it's like, oh, that's an imperative. I didn't realize that. Like in Ephesians, which we went over when I was showing the participles, was be filled with the Holy Spirit. I mean, I guess you could recognize if you actually pay attention, but if you're just glossing over it, you don't recognize, oh, that's actually a command. Be filled with the Holy Spirit. Wait, how do you be filled with the Holy Spirit? And this is where the participles come in that context. Well, you need to speak to one another in psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs. Then you also need to sing a melody and whatnot. Sing and make melody. And the third thing was giving thanks. And the fourth thing was submitting to one another. And then, what does it mean to submit to one another? Well, it keeps on building off of that, because when it starts talking about why I submit to the husband and stuff like that, it doesn't actually use the word submit. It's actually building off of what it means to be the participle submitting to one another. So what happens in Greek is a lot of times the main verb could be up here, but down here in the context is actually using this main verb, even though there's no verb in this extra clause down below. So you have to kind of like, what is he trying to say? Is he trying to bring that down and making a connecting thought? Because when you're looking at the New Testament, you have to see it in a or letters in general. You don't just dissect. This part means this. This part means this. Well, he wrote the letter as a whole, so it's going to mean something as a whole. So you have to understand in that lens. And I think a lot of times, if you read commentaries, they dissect it in a sense where it kind of loses the whole meaning of what the letter is. So you have to kind of be aware of that when you're reading commentaries. But also be aware that that usually authors, especially Paul, for example, he generally uses what he's saying beforehand. And sometimes he'll omit words because he's already said it before. So you have to kind of be aware of that. Does that make sense? Yeah, hopefully. Any questions on the summary of these moods? So the indicative mood happens the most. The next to that would be participles. I can't tell you what, they're probably equally in use as the subjunctive imperative, but as long as you know the indicative and you're going to come across something that looks different, that's when I would just say, hey, I need to look this up. And then the more you get used to it, you're just like, okay, that's what that is. And then I recommend this, I guess, going back through grammar, if possible, different grammar, and learning Greek again from a different perspective, and then kind of saying, I agree with this grammar because it goes this way, and it explains it this way, and it makes sense in the context of Scripture and stuff like that, because not all grammars are the same. Anyway, everyone has different philosophies, just like commentaries. Everyone has a different understanding of certain verses. Okay, that's pretty much done with the moods. Now we're just going to look at some extra stuff. And the first thing we're going to look at is the me verbs. And you already know one of the words, a me. That's a me verb. Only thing is, a me is very irregular, and it can't be really used as a paradigm for you to memorize. So the basic idea behind the me verbs is that this was the old caveman way of saying, me do this instead of I do this. I don't know how legit that is, but that's what they say. That's the ice maker.
No, I mean like I actually heard.
Ice maker.
It was over there.
Echo. There's a ice maker in this building.
You're going deaf, Stumpy.
I'm not going to Jeff. I actually heard something.
Losing an arm and your hearing.
So ultimately, though, by the time we get to the New Testament Greek, it's Koine Greek, or Koine, depending on your pronunciation. Me verbs kind of are starting to drop out. And really by today's standpoint, in modern Greek, the only thing that is available now is the a-me verb. So the basic idea behind this is that languages simplify. You can see this in English language. We used to have a more inflected language, thee, thy, thou, all the old Bible language, like King James. And also the dative case in English generally had the word to in it, which became a preposition. Anyway, side stuff. But generally speaking, languages simplify. And if you have two ways of saying words, sometimes those two ways either condense to one or they interchange, which we can see that in some words, like Lego, which I speak, and orao, which I will speak, if I remember right. Anyway, you got two different words coming together. That's basically that. Hey, look, Aaron's here. But when we come here, we're learning the me verbs, which is a different type of verbal system. So it's going to have all the things you learn. You're going to learn, all the moods that we learn, all the tenses that we learn, voices. So it's all that's going to be the same. The only thing difference is going to be the ending. So instead of o, ace, a, well, we'll learn that it's going to be an ending with the me. And the main words in the New Testament, which I think I agree, which would be didomi, tithemi, and istemi. Histemi, the breathing mark. Yeah, so those are some important ones right there. When we look at the vocabulary or any dictionary, you're going to notice that it's going to have the me's at the end.
Say the vocabulary.
So someone wants to say the vocabulary, James. Stubby.
Stubby? getting the fake nickname that you came up with wrong.
Oh, well, Stubby. It's fine.
Take it away, James.
Yeah, take it
We
away.
should all do it together.
Good, Stubby.
Lead us in it. Do the first one. I'll see if you get it right.
I'm not gonna get it right.
What's the very first one pronounced like? The what is the alpha?
I have no idea.
You don't know the sound of the alpha?
No, it's an A.
It's like an A.
Yeah.
Alpha.
Yeah.
Or ah. So anistemi. Anistemi.
Oh, okay. Honest statement.
There we go. So you have ah. Well, you can actually do that on or ani. Stay me. Yeah. Or you have apa dido me. Or dido me. Apa dido me. Now we're getting it. Okay, good.
Join in.
Yeah.
John.
So if you look at
I know how to pronounce these, James.
so
Say we should all
since we're on the vocabulary, you have iste,
We stay.
which is actually from the word sta, I believe, but this means to stand. So I stand. Well, you have if you add the preposition ana, which is up. Well, aniste me is I stand up. Yeah. Then you have huh?
You know the name Anastasia, I think it comes from that root because it's also resurrection. It's
Oh yes, it is.
Anastasis.
Yep, Anastasis, yep. You have Dido, which is from da. Oops, I can't write. Da, I believe, and that means give. And so Dido means I give. Well, if you add a apa, well, apa is usually what, away from? Well, I give. Well, the way it's translated is I give back or I repay. So if you can know the main words, you can kind of get the compound words somewhat, or have at least a basic idea how that would work. Just a helpful clue. This is actually a pretty popular word. Katharos, clean, pure.
What is cathartic?
I don't know. I know what you're talking about, though. I don't know. I think I looked it up once upon a time. You have a gnosko. Well, now you have another word with the gno stem. What is it?
It is a purgative drug.
Oh.
Purges, like purges.
Anyway, gnosko. Well, you have gnorizo instead of I know, I make known. So you can use some of the things that you already know to help you do these verbs. Anyway, moving on. So me verbs, so they're different than the O conjugation, omega, that is. So instead of O-A-S-A, you have me, sigma, sin, mente, asi. So the plural is pretty similar for the most part. Instead of usi, it's asi, but you have the mente. And the imperfect is nu, sigma, non, mente, san. So it looks almost like the secondary tense ending. So the main thing you want to memorize here is going to be the present tense. And also the connecting vowels are going to be a little different. I believe it's primarily going to be an epsilon. Oh, no, never mind. There is no connecting vowels. Correcting myself. No connecting vowels. So part of hard part about this is it's sometimes good to know the roots. So didomes comes from da. In the present singular, the omicron right here from da lengthens to an omega. So it's a do, and then there's a reduplication. And the reduplication has an iota instead of an epsilon like the perfect does. So you're basically adding, changing the da to a, get a da, you lengthen that to an omega, then you're going to add a iota and reduplicate it, and then you add the ending, which is going to be the me, or sigma, or scene, and that's kind of how you do it. But in the plural, the vowel does not lengthen, it stays the same, but you have the still reduplication going on. So istemi comes from sta, and really there is a reduplication, but the first sigma, because Greek doesn't like, from what I'm told, doesn't like the sibilant sounds, so they usually drop those. So instead of systemi, it's histemi. Can you imagine saying systemi a lot really fast?
Systeme.
Yeah, you can do it. Yeah. Yeah, so I think the breathing mark is really what's making the identifying the sigma that's dropping out. But anyway, so it's helpful to know the stems. Like tithemi is the, and because the if you have a reduplication, if you remember the perfect, you don't want to say the, you want to you kind of smoothing out. Is that it? What is it? I forgot the form. Anyway, tithemi instead of tithemi. Tithe. Can you say tithemi? There we go. It's a little awkward. Anyway, and you'll notice that in the singular, the epsilon or the alpha is lengthened to an eta, where the in the plural they stay the same. I'm trying to think here. The key thing I do want you to know is in the aorist, instead of sigma alpha, it's a kappa alpha. And if you remember kappa alpha and the omega endings, omega endings, that is for the perfect. But how you're going to know the difference is there's no reduplication. There's the augment too, but that's a pastime morpheme.
But you wouldn't have that perfect unless it's.
Yeah, you're right. Well, yeah, but this is aorist. Yeah, you have the yeah, you're right. You have the pastime morpheme, which the perfect doesn't have, but you also don't have the reduplication. And so if you see a kappa alpha, it may be a little difficult. So it's not your like key sign. Reduplication is going to be a really big key, and that epsilon at the beginning. But even then, epsilon can be kind of confusing because the pluperfect doesn't always have the epsilon, or it can have the epsilon. Anyway, any questions on this? Main thing I think I told you is that the best way to understand these is knowing the roots. So it's just more so recognition than anything else, really, at this point. And just knowing that verbs have two conjugations. You have the me conjugation and the omega conjugation. And the good thing is that the omega conjugation is the majority, and the me is not as much. It's just something that you have to be aware of. And the passage that we're going to look at today, I believe, there is one, but look at that later. Any questions on that? So adjectives. I like these. These have some irregularities. If I could speak. But honestly, these are like the most easiest to recognize. If you see a pos or pon, think of all or every or whole. Huh? Yeah. But pos or pon, if you do see a pos or pon, 9 times out of 10 it's going to be this word, one of these words up here. And you just need to, and they follow after the, this would be the third declension nouns. This would be first, and this would be, third. Sosia, yep. Only however, megas is going to be second, first, second, and paulus is going to be second, first, second. So irregular right here, or actually, depending on how you look at it.
We don't have that page in our books, I don't think.
You do have it.
Where? You know where? I can't find it.
You know what page that's on?
It's not in the me verbs
It's not in the me verbs chapter.
chapter.
It's after the me verbs chapter.
Page 191.
191, there you go.
The article. So it's before.
There we go.
Me verbs.
But basically, the main thing I want you to understand is pos, pon. If you see that, it's going to be whole, all, or every. If you see megas, that's mega cool. It's big. It's large. It's great. Think of that. Paulus would be, if you see a Paul, it's going to be much or many. Again, if you are able to know your noun endings, it'll help you greatly just to understand what case it's in. But if you haven't got to that point yet, if you could just memorize that pos, pon, mega, and Paul, you got it. You at least be able to recognize the meaning of the word. And then you just have to figure out how it fits in the sentence, syntactically speaking. I just wanted to show you that because these happen, I want to say almost every page of the Bible, basically. So you'll see them a lot. Much, many, yeah. So let's move on to the additional pronouns. Don't know what page that's on. What do you have a question?
Yeah.
No.
Chapter before.
Chapter before, one right before. I did this thinking through what was most important to least important, but there's a lot of pronouns when I was making this. So we'll start off with the relative pronouns. These are, I like relative pronouns. So that'd be like who, which. That's basically it right there. Who, which. Isn't it? Sometimes that. Sometimes that. Then there's this whole thing, restrictive and unrestrictive sentences. You kind of figure out how you want to go about doing that, but we don't have to cover that right now. So these endings, if you look, this is going to be second declension, first declension, and that's going to be second declension endings. They almost, if you notice that the hey and ha right here, they look like articles. But I'm pretty sure the accent is the main difference. You'll see an accent on these, and that's what's going to be the clue that this is a relative pronoun. So if you see a ha, it doesn't mean it's necessarily a the, even though article can act as a relative. So when you look at, I'm not actually going to cover that chapter on the article, but article, I will say, can be used for multiple different things, and one of which is a relative. So I don't know if it's just when you're going through figuring out the from capital to adding accents and stuff like that, and this maybe lost in transition or whatever. I don't know all the whole issue with that, but actually, I can't even say that because article like ton, with ones with the tau at the end, they can act as a relative too. But main thing is knowing that there's relative pronouns, which is which, who, and that, and these are those, and they follow after the second, first, and declensions. Second for masculine and neuter, and first for feminine. So examples on how they work. Usually I kind of want to break it, set it apart, basically, is what I want to do from the sentence. So it would be the man, ha anthropos, is my brother. So the man is my brother. So you have the S-teen right here, which is from a me. So that's why you have two nominative cases right here. The man is my brother. Well, the relative, what it's basically doing is going to be describing generally what comes before, which in this case would be the man. So the man, what man? The one who's speaking to the teacher. Has would be who, lege, he speaks to the teacher. So really the lege is finding its subject in the relative pronoun. So the man who is speaking to the teacher is my brother. So this is a little different than a participle when it's can be used sort of in the same way. The one who's speaking, or it's describing the verb, main verb, whereas the relative pronoun is more describing the noun or the adjective in this case. And the second example is just a case difference. So you have the man is my brother. Actually, the man is my brother. You have in the dative case, to whom. You have legusin. So you'll notice that this is plural, third plural, and this is going to be just a singular ending right here, os. So instead of to whom they are speaking, the man to whom they are speaking. Yeah, so that's still that one, but the subject is going to be in the verb on that one. The man to whom they are speaking is my brother. Okay. There's also indefinite relatives. And so this is basically like a whoever. So hastis, but oftentimes in the when you're translating, it's just going to be the same as the relative who. The way I like to put it is, you have the definite relative, which is dr here, right here. It's basically saying more specific. The man who is speaking. Well, the indefinite relative would be like, you can think of like a group of people, and it's like someone within that group or the group themselves is speaking. So whoever in this group is speaking. Then you can have a what's called a directive with a what did I do for IP? Indirect? No. I should have wrote this out. Related to the indefinite relative pronoun is the use of the relative pronoun, which does not refer to a specific person or thing with the subjunctive. Yep.
Are you asking what the I stands for?
Yes. It's the indefinite particle, indefinite particle, on. Indefinite particle, on. Sorry. So the IP is indefinite particle. So you have a direct relative, which would be the who, which, but you have this on right here, or it on. Now that's going to be whoever. And this is generally seen like whoever comes to me, I will not cast out. So the ones who, the Father draws, or sends me, draws to me. I'm trying to remember. I'm paraphrasing now. When Jesus is, I think it's John 6. Off the top of my head, I could be wrong. Jesus says, the one who comes to me is the one who the Father draws, and who I will not cast out. Whoever comes to me, I will not cast out. Well, you have this kind of like general whoever. So this is like to a specific person right here, or group of people. And this one is like a specific person or group within a group of people. And this one is kind of like this whoever. Yeah, just whoever. So it's not as definite in the way it comes across. I'm sorry, not confusing, but yeah. And then you also have a indefinite pronoun, which is different than the relative pronoun. So the indefinite pronoun would be like anyone, anybody, anything, somebody, or someone. So it's not like this person or that person, but it's anyone. And generally it's just going to be a tis or t. And the next slide we're going to look at the interrogative pronouns, I believe. And the main difference between these is this one has no accents, so it's enclitic. Whereas the interrogative is going to have accents. So this is looks exactly the same as the indefinite pronoun, which is anybody. But the interrogative, which has accents, is going to be basically asking a question like what, why, which. Just basically asking a question. Who is this? What did they see? Why? And so on and so forth. I'm kind of just going through them now because I'm not expecting you to know it all. There's also a reciprocal and reflexive pronoun. Now, if you remember the middle voice can be translated as reciprocal or reflexive, right? Remember that? It's one of the 5 uses of the middle. You have the intensive, you have the reflexive, the reciprocal. I should have refreshed myself on that one. So you have 5 uses of the middle. It would be also passive, but include passive. So I became loosed. I myself am loose. I loose myself. I loosed for myself. And in the plural, it would be we loosed one another. So that would be the 5 uses. I'm trying to think. So that would be passive, intensive, and that would be reflexive, and that would be reciprocal. I'm trying to...
Would reciprocal be?
Oh yeah, reciprocal would be the plural one, yeah. I can't remember the name of that one. All the R's, I think. Anyway, so because the middle voice can be pretty ambiguous, in other words, you don't really know without context, sometimes the author will want to make it clear. And how they make it clear is by using the reciprocal reflexive pronouns. So the reciprocal pronouns would be alas or alelon, and alelois and alelus. And this is basically the one another. This would be reciprocal, yep. So, agapo min alelus, let us love one another. Yeah, the reciprocal would be the plural one in the middle, but yeah. Huh?
Say something, help remember all alone. Or not all alone when you have one another.
True that. You're not all alone when you got one another. It's a good way to do it. Then you have reflexive. Now this one's going to be depending on the person, but generally this is just basically I, myself, yourself, themself, itself, so on and so forth. And that's what these do. So this is basically making it clear, whereas middle is not necessarily as clear. And then we have numerals. Now, I know in your book you have a whole bunch, and also in your vocabulary. But the one I really wanted to look at is the number 1. And knowing that there's a lot of different ways to say 1. And that's these right here. Numerals work kind of like nouns. They have you have the third declension, and then that's the first, and that is third. But what I want to point out is these. These look like something you've already learned. They look like prepositions, don't they? Ace and in. But the main difference is the breathing mark. Instead of ace, it's hace. Instead of in, it's hin. There's a one hin. That's the way I memorize it. One hen and a chicken pen. That's how I memorize that one. One hen and a chicken pen. So recognizing that there's gender involved with numbers and there's case involved with numbers, this is something you have to recognize and be familiar with. But I did want to at least point out that if you see it in or ace, look for the breathing mark, because that can be tricky when you're translating. You're like, why is it in here? Oh, it means it's hin, not in. Anyway, that happens a lot. Any questions on numbers? So if you were doing a genitive, it would be of one or from one. This would be to or by or with one. And this is just one. I had one dog. Yeah. So, what time is it?
8.
8? Okay.
So we're on time?
We're on time. Good. So for application, can you all read that? So this is out of Hebrews 12. I translated for speed sake, but I kind of wanted to show. Does anyone have their English translations on them?
James does.
I always got this little guy.
Can you turn to Hebrews 12 for me? Now, I did this for the most part in a literal translation. I try to be as wooden, maybe, as you could say, as possible. So,
You want me to just read?
yeah, read it. Just 1 and 2,
Okay.
or at least 1.
Therefore, we also, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every weight and the sin which so easily ensnares us, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, looking into Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and has sat down at the right hand of the throne of God.
Yeah. Now, read, can I see it one second? I gotta see what translation this is. Yeah. So you'll notice that it says, therefore we also, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, and it says, let us lay aside every weight and the sin which so easily ensnares us, and let us run with endurance with the race that is set before us. Now you'll notice that there's two ways to let us in there. And but if you remember, in the subjunctive case, and possibly in the imperative case, you can find the word "let us" in your translation. I'm only pointing this out because I think oftentimes participles are I don't know. I guess for my study is often participles are maybe not necessarily neglected, but because not seen in light of structure sense. Anyway, so everything in the green is going to be a participle. And if you didn't listen to my participle lecture, I'm sorry. Did you listen to it? That's a no. So one thing that participles does, did you listen to it, Jess? Yeah, you weren't, yeah. One thing that participles do is they kind of give you the, if you're going to teach a lesson and you want to find your points to that lesson, well, in Greek, participles are basically your points. You have your main verb, and you got point 1, 2, 3, or how many participles there are. So last time we looked at Ephesians 5:19, somewhere around there. Anyway, and the command there was be filled with the Holy Spirit. Now this is just my interpretation. You can read other commentaries, other people, and see what they say. You can disagree with me, that's fine. But from a language standpoint, you have this command. Then you have all these participles, which is what I was just saying earlier. You're speaking to one another. The ing is basically the English participle, and one way of translating the participle, especially if it doesn't have an article. So the ing, So makes the participle of speaking to one another in psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs, singing and making melody. And then you have, it's one I always forget, forgiving thanks, and then submitting to one another. So it's like, what does it mean to be filled with the Holy Spirit? Boom, 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 boom. Paul in Ephesians is telling you what it means to be filled with the Holy Spirit. That's my take on it, because that's what I see what participles do. Well, in the same way it happens in Hebrews. So we have toigarun, kai hemes. You'll notice that it has the un right there. Sometimes it's translated as therefore. I don't know, I just did for this reason, or for that reason, depending on context. For this reason, even us, or and us, also us, depends on how you want to translate the kai there. Kai is pretty flexible. But I did for this reason, even us, having a cloud, or great, so great, I just said huge, a huge cloud of witnesses surrounding us. So you have two participles. And I think they would go together in this case. But then you have another one, which is laying aside. See that word right there? Panta? Remember what pan is? I know we just went through a whole bunch, so I'm not expecting you to know it. But it's all, every, or whole. Well, panta, every. I did the every. You don't know all these yet, but this right here is means weight. And you have to ask the question, why is weight fronted? I mean, it's one thing you can ask. Laying aside every weight and the ensnarings, or you don't have to always translate the article, but and ensnaring sin. So there, to me, there's like a kind of like an emphasis on that weight. But anyway, Paul's kind of laying out having this witnesses, laying aside every weight and ensnaring sin, and then we have this subjunctive right here, which is let us run, or it's we may run. I'm taken as the hortatory, which is the first use I showed you. Let us run the race with endurance on account of the one who is set before us. Now, if you look at the English translation, this one's really kind of hard to translate. So I'm not expecting you all to know this. But the English one says, let us run with endurance the race that is set before us. We have a dia right here, which is a preposition, which in the genitive it's through, and the accusative it's on account of. Hupamanes, let's run the race with endurance. So this right here is endurance, and it's in the genitive case. Most translations, most translations put these together, dia and hupamenos, but they translate dio as with, which it's possible. Only thing is, because the word order, I kind of made it go with the participle, which is in the accusative case. So since it's accused on account of the one who says before. So I'm just showing you that there's ways you could translate this outside of the order. I'm not saying this is what I would do every time. I just wanted to show you that it's possible.
So what you've done here is you're associating sit before us with the person, not the race, which is what the translation you read it.
Yes.
They say the race is what sit before us, whereas you're translating it as a person who sit before us.
So I'm saying, well, I'm not going to be too hard fast on this. I just did this at the last minute, and this is a possible translation. It's not necessarily saying that's right. But I just want to show you that they're, in Greek, word order is not necessarily strict. It can be flexible. And this is one way you could translate this sentence. So let us run the race with endurance on account of the one who is set before us. In other words, who's the one set before us? You can almost argue Jesus is set before us, or you can make it the race that's set before us. It depends on how you want to focus on the path. But anyway, my main point in trying to say this is we have this cloud of witnesses surrounding us. We're laying aside every weight and snaring sin. So let us run this race. To me, that makes a huge difference than saying what this thing says. We have this great cloud of witnesses, so let us lay aside every weight and also let us run the race. To me, there's two let us there, and you're almost giving this, let me put it in blue, this sentence right here, equal authority with this sentence right here by translating as both let us. But I guess what I'm trying to say is, because there's really one main verb, and I'm going to point to that is the subjunctive case, and the rest of the participles are building off or explaining that one, and that is how I would translate this. Now, I'm not saying that this is the right way, because honestly, this is what you see in most English translation is permissible and fine. I'm just showing you that when you look at the Greek, it could mean something else, and I'm showing you an example of what it could mean. Does that make sense?
So when they translated it, where did they get the second letters?
Well, participles,
This would be the first one, but
yeah, so participles right here can be kind of hard to, they're kind of hard in general. So participles can be complementary, and they can complement the main verb and take on the same. So if it's like a command, participles can act as commands if there's a command there. And in a sense, this is acting. The subjunctive here is acting almost like a command. Let us do this, and so the participle can follow suit with that. The only thing I'm saying is I want people to recognize that as a participle before they make the decision to translate it as a command. Which you won't see that in English, but you will see it in Greek. Does that make sense? Now, I have these things. This it has some things I've covered, which I actually found this today. So it happened to be some things I've already covered, but it talks about what I'm showing you here about the let us in Hebrews 12. Hebrews 6:1 about either striving or being carried. It talks about that. It even talks about James 1:7 when NIV translates every good and perfect gift is from above. However, James is using two different words for gift, but the NIV is making them one, every good and perfect gift from above. And it's possible that at one translation you could do, instead of every good gift is from above, or every good and perfect gift is from above, you could say every generous act of giving and every perfect gift is from above, distinguishing what those two types of gifts are, which you won't see that in some English translations. So I recommend looking at this, just showing you that these are just some of the more maybe common ones. My main reason for showing you this is that I think it's very important to look at the Greek and know the Greek because of issues like this. Should we take that participle as a command, complementing the main verb in that sense? Or should we see it as this way? And then, should we take a look at the word order, like in this part right here? Word order, since it's flexible, it could mean what I'm saying up here, which is completely different than what most English translations say, right? But generally speaking, the rule is usually find the closest antecedent, and the closest antecedent for dia is hupamanes. So that's the main reason why people pick that. However, it's possible that it could be another way. And you just have to make a contextual and interpretive choice. Like I said, every English translation is an interpretation. So any questions on this? What?
Agona. So.
Oh, on.
I'm familiar with that.
Which one again?
where you've got the
So-
asterisk.
And the hupomanes.
Yeah.
Trichomen, there's the subjunctive. Tar.
Oh, yeah.
Pronomenon, Aiden, agona. What is agona?
I want to say that is the.
Didn't recognize that.
That's race.
Race.
Yeah. So this is endurance,
Okay.
and this is
Run.
the one who set before us, and this is race. So this is one reason why I'm saying word order as in my sense, a key thing, because you have race all the way at the end. Why is race all the way at the end? Is it not as important, or is it important?
So where in the Greek do you get on account of?
On account, so that'll be the dia. So in the accusative case, it's on account of or because of, and in the genitive, it would be through.
Is hupomenes genitive?
Yes.
So through endurance. So dia in the genitive is through, right?
Yeah.
Through endurance, let us run the race, or run. Let us run the one, or
So
who is
it'd be,
set before us.
it would be, yeah, it would be like, let us run through endurance. Yeah. The one who's set before us. Let us run the race through endurance. I just had a hard time connecting it, and I thought this made sense better. That's why I picked this. That's my initial thing with actually looking at what other people say. I really did it really fast. But yeah.
General rule of thumb, if you guys decide to continue with your Greek studies, if you're wanting to just utterly discourage yourself and never want to do Greek again, go read Hebrews. It's really hard.
Yeah.
Why would you tell us this?
I'm saying it's a good be way of saying
Yeah.
don't start with Hebrews, go to John or something. It's a lot easier. I tried, when I finished up Greek, I decided to start like just kind of reading on my own. And so I thought Hebrews might be interesting, and I got so frustrated and discouraged.
But now the more I think about it, on account of the one who's set before us, and it talks about fixing our eyes onto Jesus, I don't know, I'm kind of leaning, I think about it. Anyway, that's it. Any questions on that?